So, Destiny 2 has finally released new intriguing PvE content. It serves as an exotic quest, and it serves as another legendary-esque difficulty mission. Sarah's Shield will be the primary objective of the seasonal story this week, and honestly, my thoughts are quite positive over this mission. Everyone knows that after last season, which was, somewhat lackluster, most people would agree it was somewhat lackluster. It's actually nice and refreshing to finally get a new exotic mission, at least something new to look for. At one hand, this mission was entirely expected. We've had very little refreshing endgame content, and although I do not really think people will enjoy replaying this activity every week for light rewards, unless it's, a sped up process of actually completing the activity, or you maximize your, clear time for the whole activity, I'm just not sure if people are going to like it. But let's see the objectiveness for it, and more particularly, let's see how the game design for this mission is. The mission starts by accepting an exotic mission to go to the Sarah's Shield mission. If you were familiar with the last two seasonal missions, it's in the middle area of both of those two bunkers. The structure of the mission is interesting, as it fundamentally serves the same purpose of Preservation, to teach the raid mechanics. Preservation hardly touches on the concepts, and I promise you a majority of players who haven't done the raid will not understand the mechanics. This is because the mechanics can be brute forced by just picking up the resonance charges in sets of 3 to push the payload until you can make it to the first encounter. The simple rooms is even worse at teaching, as all you really need to do is randomly find yourself the right room, which isn't even random to begin at that, and you can just brute force it like I said, or like with the last encounter. So how does the new Sarah's Shield mission do in teaching the raid mechanics? Like Deep Stone Crypt, there are 3 fundamental mechanics that you need to learn, and it actually does a quite a decent job. If you don't already know what the Deep Stone Crypt mechanics are, let me give you the 3 main objectives that are, common in all 3 encounters. Or less on the suppressor side, but it's still important. Scanner scans for terminals to use. Operator allows you to interact with scanner terminals. Suppressor allows you to shoot a shielded enemy or boss, kind of like an objective, if you stand on the suppressor plate highlighted for a total of 3 separate plates. The mechanics must be used several times in order to advance in the facility and in order to do damage to the boss of Suppressor, so learning these do have a fundamental purpose to the actual activity, as you will not be able to complete it if you do not understand it. If you can complete this activity, you can understand the mechanics themselves in the raid encounters. Although, like Preservation, if you need to complete this for a pinnacle reward every week, it will get kind of boring and you must complete the basic puzzles, which is just, honestly, a kindergartner could do this, and it's just kind of boring after the first time. I do want to note that in this mission, they do randomly change things now and then. Certain terminals are changed. For example, there's one room where you need to use scanner to figure out how to move in the room, and then you need to go through like a maze, but you can only know what the right path is if you use scanner. And in this room, it actually changes which terminals unlock, so you can't just memorize it, you always have to use scanner, no matter what. No matter if you want your guide, you have to check for yourself to know which one is the right terminal to use. Which is interesting, and I love it, because that means you don't necessarily have to brute force it, and you need to understand how it works, which is simple, but it's still good. Now, let me ask you, did you complete the Legendary campaign? Have any okay weapons? Do you just regularly play the game? Then you're probably good enough to complete the mission in Legend solo difficulty right off the bat. It's just not that difficult. There are only 2 major encounters. The Brigs, kill 3 Brigs with large amounts of adds, great for out-clearing builds over damage. And there's the final boss room, a moderate amount of adds requiring you to use Suppressor to remove immunity, shield off the boss, and to kill him overall. Linears are great for this, you don't really need, wave clear. If you use anything Solar 3.0, you should be able to clear out most of the things in the room. Nothing entirely crazy with these bosses, and the majority of players should be capable of beating these activities. The only difficulty might be staying alive in these rooms if you're not have all touched Light 3.0 with build crafting, so pretty much new players. Again, the encounters themselves are not super difficult, but not as easy as the average the seasonal content. Take it slowly, and you should guarantee not dying. If you've done Whisper or 0 Hour, you'll do great. Don't worry about it. Reusing assets is difficult, not because copy and paste is difficult, but because reusing assets isn't inherently bad, but when creativity isn't put into making reused assets feel meaningful or interesting, then reusing assets is almost always bad. Throughout the last 3 years of Destiny 2, I felt the amount of reusing assets to feel progressively less interesting every season. However, this one single activity is the exception. In Beyond Light, I felt underwhelmed by the little explorability of the Clovis Brave facilities. Even in the Deepstone Crypt, I felt as the facility was mostly empty. You see a huge darkness statue and the source of the Exo creation. And wait, really? That's it? The facility hyped up for just to go to space station? Now, don't get me wrong, the space aspect was fun, and it wasn't really a problem, but hear me out. To the point since Forsaken, we had gotten a dungeon in every major expansion. I felt when the space station fell and the lore leading up to, we need to defend the crypt secrets from the rest of the world. And then we get, what, shooting stars? And then what was new? In the trailer, there was Darkness Pyramid section, some little not desert, sorry. It was a Darkness Pyramid design. And what do you think? What we were gonna get? A dungeon? Potentially a dungeon? Since we do get a new dungeon every, DLC at that point. And guess what we got? If I recall correctly, it was simply Exo Simulation. Of course, that was also bundled with the Lament, exotic, but it still just felt underwhelming for the most part. There was no new dungeon released, and everyone forgot about Beyond Light didn't release with a dungeon. Then we get the Seraph Shield mission, a mission built on the assets of the Clovis Spray facilities and the Deepstone Crypt raid. So, how does this mission feel? It feels like that dungeon we didn't get. Of course, it doesn't have the quality of a dungeon, but it does have the similarity of having high quality rooms and high quality encounters for the most part, I guess. The assets felt mostly fresh and needed. Felt we were exploring a new place while taking advantage of old assets perfectly, flawlessly, and the transition between rooms was perfect. You didn't really feel like it was something old. This is how assets should be used, and an interesting purpose built upon creativity. Although I'm not a big fan of using nostalgia, as I feel most companies get it entirely wrong. Nostalgia for the sake of nostalgia isn't really that great. Nostalgia should be gathered from furthering the story and getting references from the past. But reusing assets to purposely get a nostalgia hit is strange to me. I don't really care to see the space station again. Especially since it's pretty much fundamentally the same space station. You can even see it when you go outside. I don't really care for getting to explore another space station area. Maybe if it was an entirely new, different design, maybe even a new ship, kind of one like the ship that we currently have, the Helm. What if it was cool to explore a new spaceship like that? Cabal's ship architecture has always been pretty interesting. Have we really explored another Cabal ship since, some season and back and then in Destiny 2 campaign whenever we had to go through the big Red War ships? I don't really think so. After escaping the catch, you jump off 3 platforms to make it back to the outside of general area in the parkour area of the Deepstone Crypt space station. I was actually kind of surprised that they didn't play the Deep Lullaby song. And that was interesting, because I don't really remember the song that they played. It wasn't memorable, but it wasn't bad either. It's Destiny music. It's not always great, but when it does hit, it does hit. And I feel like this time it didn't really necessarily hit, but that's okay. That's just my opinion. Disregard that. It doesn't matter. It's not really an objective thing. That's pretty much entirely subjective at that point. But if you're wondering how much is reused, if you do go under the space station, you can find... Whoops. I got a phone call there. My bad. Anyways, continuing back to what I was saying. If you're wondering how much is reused, if you go under the space station, you can find exactly the same parkour section as if you were doing the raid after leaving the Atrax encounter. In other words, they didn't really change the parkour. In fact, if you keep moving towards the edge of the doors in the Atrax encounter, you can easily, without using any tricks, escape the map and go out of bounds. In other missions, I feel like Destiny would have put a return to mission screen or out of bounds screen and just kill you. But it is almost as Destiny wanted to either let you explore or just completely forgot to prevent you from going out of bounds. After all, it is exactly like the Deepstone Crypt raid, except for I think there's a little bit of terrain removed, which allows you to even go outside in the first place. But yeah, it's just kind of remodeled for this mission. In fact, after parkouring in space, the rest of the space station is mostly the same as in the raid, including the nuclear core room. It is pretty much identical. I wish they would have flipped the space station towards the right, and we can explore the right side of the space station. Perhaps I would have felt differently if they showed what's on the right side. It's probably just identical, it's probably just symmetrical, but it would have been a little bit more interesting. You could have changed it a little bit more. However, that's mostly it. I knew the mission format would most likely be exactly like the raid, or at least the space station part, but it felt new and refreshing, up to the point where you make it outside the space station, where that illusion is gone. You can tell that they reuse those assets, and I no longer felt like the quality of the rooms were the same after that, since there's a little bit part that's completely unique, but after that, it just kind of felt like you were just kind of doing exactly what's in the raid. And that's a kind of a problem, because that's what I didn't like about Preservation. I never liked it, because it's just exactly what the raid was. It didn't really teach mechanics well, and it just seemed like they needed an extra pinnacle for you to have, or give you another, quote-unquote content piece. And they just literally gave you exactly what they did in the raid, put it in, changed, the amount of enemies for solo, make it really easy, and that's it. It's not really that original, not even that unique. Would have been cool if we explored something else in the pyramid, but, they didn't really do that, and I think it's probably just because they had lack of time. Although, let's take a look at what environmental features they have added to the season and the exotic quest itself. Although not introduced by the mission, the season includes the brand new Seraph Tower. It's usually right in front of the bunkers and in the seasonal weekly mission, now including in the exotic mission itself too. I'm not super clear what the name of the towers are, however the purpose of them is to limit the battlefield and to worry about an environmental hazard, which will kill you if you were exposed for too long. It's kinda interesting and uninteresting at the same time. I do enjoy them adding a new hazard to the game. I wish you had to complete some optional mechanic to stop the tower from limiting the playfield, or somewhere to shut it down, but you either just avoid it or finish whatever encounter is in the heist playlist that you're in. The battle song is an interesting new mechanic, where you must kill specific named enemy, and if you do not, the battlefield will have the ability suppression until you kill said enemy. Interestingly enough, I recall that they're adding a similar mechanic to Lightfall, so perhaps this is to prepare the community for a new specific enemy that deals with suppression. The new main puzzle/hazard is interesting, as it wasn't at all showed off in the Deepstone Crypt raid, but you do need the scanner to figure out which tiles on the floor are safe to move around in, and if you move on the wrong tile, then the room will wipe you. I really enjoy this, and would like to see a raid layer of the Deepstone Crypt raid where you have a mechanic similar to such as having one person act as a guide to lead 5 separate people in a room where only the guide can see the safe tile. It promotes team play and provides a new value for scanners, although I can easily come up with several different ways where they can use scanner in order for you to communicate with your teammates, similarly to already how they have done it in the Deepstone Crypt raid, but perhaps in a more interesting way where you have a guide show where everybody needs to go, not just tell people what to shoot or what to interact with. Interestingly enough, I believe Destiny added a falling animation, although not entirely sure, as it could have been a reused asset. If you were to move toward the Add About section, which is easily accessible through the beginning of the Atrax encounter, or I guess suppose after the Atrax encounter, where the parkour starts, if you fall off out of bounds, you can start a free-falling animation for a couple of seconds. Perhaps there was originally the idea to create some hazard that pushes you off the station and potentially fall off orbit off the station. Not entirely sure, completely speculation. But it seems that the idea was scrapped at the very least, and it is still odd the mechanic was left there. This could have been a fun and creative idea if they added it to the space station parkour and would have had potentially removed the bitter taste of reusing the entirety of the parkour section, since there would have been at least some new environmental hazard, which could have been interesting, but you know what? Oh well, whatever. I still do like that this mission came. I'll start talking about the new exotic weapon quickly. After finishing the mission, you get a craftable Revision 0 and can level it to shape it. The gun has 2 primary firing methods, a heavy 2-burst or a light 4-shot burst, although it seems like right now the 4-shot burst is stronger DPS output. Besides that, the weapon has a basic barrel and magazines to choose from, and nothing really out of the ordinary there. The perks work for PvE and PvP. You can choose from Vorpal and some other PvP options, although I'd rather not comment on those since I'm not an active PvP player. You also have an extra slot for stock options, and most important section is the Catalyst, which will completely elevate your experience with this weapon. The Catalyst serves as your second main perk for your weapon, or I suppose the 4th perk on your gun. You have 4 Catalysts to choose from, and we have options such as Outlaw, 4th Time to Charm to name 2. These, I believe, are not fully released in the game and will progress weekly on the story missions. The gun itself also comes with anti-barrier, and its main purpose is getting headshots, will allow you to charge 4 sniper bullets, which can one-shot anti-barrier shields and compete against Arclists. Although, without the Catalyst to see how strong this weapon can be, I can't imagine many people switching away from the linear arc plus, unless you're using Verpal and 4 times the charm. The weapon isn't that necessarily that strong. And that's really about it. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and like. I'm trying to create more Destiny videos, but also everything in the gaming industry. So if you'd like to help me progress my work here, please subscribe. I'm currently working on trying to work on better editing techniques and better audio. Anyways, thanks for watching.